Hey guys, Baron here. And today, we're finally back with another anime review. It's been a while, but I'm very excited to get into it again. And this time, we're taking a look at a series that kind of challenges an already established series, an already established genre, but still making its own thing and making itself really heard in that sort of genre, so to say. And that is One Punch Man. So guys, if you enjoyed this video and this channel in general, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe that subscribe button, and share this video with a friend or two. But with that being said, let's get into it. Let's punch our way into it. Now, there are certain series that take themselves too seriously. They have a format that really doesn't allow for any comedy. And even when it's silly in its concept, it doesn't want to acknowledge that and just keeps on doing its own thing. An example of that is, for example, the Thor franchise, at least the first and the second Thor movies, which really took themselves too seriously, which didn't have any comedy and therefore diminished their entertainment value. But One Punch Man is not one of these series, and not one of these concepts. It knows its silliness, and it knows that it is ridiculous, but in that, it really establishes itself, and makes its own name for itself, and really becomes a great series because it's sort of playing with a concept and a genre, which is the superhero franchise, but it's taking it to a different level, and it's taking it from a different angle. That being, what would you do if you had unlimited power? Would that be that much fun? Now, One Punch Man has quite an interesting legacy, definitely differing from all the other animes reviewed so far on this channel. It started as a web manga, being published by someone under the acronym of One, and then it sort of went into a full-fledged anime as the popularity really exploded for it, and it essentially became a big hit. And of course, we're reviewing the anime today. And I think this origin is very interesting because it shows that wherever you come from, and whatever resources you might have from the beginning, you can still make a big hit out of something. Of course, in One Punch Man's essence, it is of course a comedy. And it, like I said, it doesn't take itself seriously, and that's why it's really funny and really enjoyable to watch. At the same time, it's a really good action flick, and it's a really good sort of action romp, and there are a lot of moments and a lot of fight scenes that are so over the top and so unrealistic, but they're so much fun to watch just because of how silly they are, and also because of how much they go all out in every single action scene. And I must say, I haven't watched an anime that is as good as this one when it comes to the raw action. And I must say that if you're after that, then you love One Punch Man because it really excels in this area. Now, as for the core plot of the series, we follow the hero Saitama, who has trained all his life to become a hero. But essentially, because he trained so much, he became way too powerful for his own good. Now, he can punch his way with one punch out of any situation and any enemy, and defeat him at once. But that, you might think, would create sort of a power complex for him, and would make him feel like a god, essentially. But what's interesting in this series is that you see what kind of destruction and what kind of misery, really, that full power and just immense power can do to you. Saitama is depressed because he never has a challenge, and he feels very unstimulated in the role of being a hero. But that essentially changes when he meets the characters like Genos and the Hero Academy, which really shows some difference and really shows that he still has areas he needs to train in. And that really is an interesting contrast to what the show shows us from the beginning. After a while, the series sort of follows him taking on Genos as an apprentice and really finding a meaning in life, besides punching his way out of situations and punching his way to victory, essentially. And that's definitely a very, very interesting trip that we get to follow him on. And it definitely makes him more of a, not relatable, but very much a more interesting character. Now, the series is kind of short. It is only 13 episodes and it only has one season. And you might think, well, doesn't that mean that you want to have more and want to have more content at the end of it? And while yes, of course, that is true because it is a great series, it also doesn't feel that way from some perspective, because in these 13 episodes, they cram so much and they are so consistent at the same time that you feel like you get so incredibly much out of every single episode. Just in terms of action series and action, action scenes, in terms of comedy, in terms of drama, you have all those things very much done well in each and every episode. So it doesn't feel like you have any fillers, and it definitely feels like every single episode is adding to the sort of plotline and the sort of storyline of the series. Now, it wouldn't be a Baron review if I didn't mention, of course, the music and of course the visuals, right? The music is so pumped. It is the most, dramatic and epic soundtrack I've ever heard. And that is definitely a good thing when it comes to this series, because it is overly dramatic. And it is, of course, overly epic. But with a soundtrack like that, it makes it seem like it's really knowing that it really knows its own shoes, and it really knows what kind of role it wants to fulfill. And if you listen to the soundtrack, you will definitely feel pumped. I can guarantee you that. Not only through the intro, which is, by the way, the most excitable intro I've ever heard to any anime, but also just the general soundtrack, the theme, and all the other stuff is just so fucking great. Now, the visuals are very, very interesting. If you go back and read the original manga, an original web manga of One Punch Man, you'll definitely see that there are some very, very simplified animations in there. And that could be because of resources, and that could be because of art style. But in this series, I feel like it sort of contrasts really well that simple animation style and a very complex and a very colorful and grand color scheme and a grand animation style. In some scenes where it has to have it for comedy's sake, but also some scenes where it doesn't have to have that, but it just is sort of an Easter egg. It has some really simplified animations, but at the same time, in those epic action scenes that there are multiple of, you get incredibly complex animations, and it really is a treat to the eye to watch. And I feel like this contrast and this combination of the both is very, very interesting, but it definitely is a good thing that it adds towards the series. Now, of course, with a hero that is so overpowered like this, you'd think that he wouldn't be relatable, and that you wouldn't feel any sort of connection to him at all. But this is where the Hero Academy comes in, and it definitely makes for an interesting concept, and it definitely makes for an interesting challenge towards Saitama. Now, the reason for this is that the Hero Academy has a ranking system, and that essentially runs from the C class to the S class. Now, the C class is the kind of hero that saves a cat from a tree, saves a kid from a running truck, stuff like that. And then you have the S class, which are essentially heroes with godlike status that can save a city from a nuclear weapon. So you got that contrast and that sort of hierarchy. But what's interesting about that is we know that Saitama is very, very powerful. We see how easy of a time he has defeating enemies, and we see just how incredibly powerful he is compared to other heroes. So we know he has brawn. But when it comes to him taking a test to enter the academy in the first place, we see that he doesn't really have the brains to really make the S class, which his apprentice, by the way, Genos, does. And that really shows an interesting sort of concept, because you might think that you're very good at something. You might think that, okay, I'm the best at this. But then the real authority and the real actual people that matters what kind of opinions they have of you, maybe they don't think that. And I think that's an interesting concept that One Punch Man sort of plays with. And definitely because Saitama is placed in a lower rank, he's essentially placed in the, I think it's a C rank first, and then he moves up. It's a definitely interesting concept that you can be underappreciated in your own sort of areas of expertise, I'd say. And even when he shows his power and shows just how powerful he is, through saving the city multiple times essentially. Because he is in such a low rank, people doubt that and are afraid of him. Of course, the show isn't perfect. It definitely has its cons. With its inability to take itself seriously, you don't ever feel fully thrilled by what the show holds. Because no villain is essentially ever a threat because Saitama can defeat him with one punch. And therefore you don't feel like there are any actual stakes and any actual threats in the show. And while the one-punching capabilities certainly makes the show enjoyable and certainly makes it comedic, it doesn't hold any sort of involvement, any sort of stakes in it. And some would say this would make the show feel completely without purpose, but that's not the case, I feel like. The show definitely shows the ridiculousness of superheroes, which let it pass. And, it's playing with a genre that has been established, but it's taken itself so seriously in the past couple of years. And that is why it's so refreshing to see a series like this, which doesn't take itself too seriously, and knows that superheroes are kind of a ridiculous concept, but still an awesome concept, of course. Still, of course, the authors could work around this sort of problem with stakes and risks better. With a threat, Saitama can actually have a problem defeating and could actually be pummeled to the ground with. But that isn't ever shown. And yes, of course, while this adds to the entertainment value, it doesn't, of course, add to the action and doesn't make it feel any sort of threatening. Overall, I'd explain One Punch Man as grounded. Not in its visuals, certainly not in its story or characters, but in its relation to superheroes in general. And because it knows how ridiculous superheroes actually are and how sort of an unreal concept they are, it definitely plays with this idea, and sometimes it actually feels like parody of the superhero genre. But it does that so successfully, and you're so involved in that sort of concept, that sort of idea in this series, that you don't ever stop loving it. And, superhero movies have a tendency to make itself really, really grand and really, really, seriously. But One Punch Man goes with its knowledge of that it is silly and expands on it and elaborates it. You don't feel how the collateral damage ravages the fictional city that they're in, or how the monsters they face are totally overpowered. But that's not something this show needs in its quest for irony, and that's the main point of this show. Guys, that is going to be it for this video. What do you think of the series? Are you going to watch it? Have you watched it? And what do you think of the superhero genre in general? Do you think it's taking itself too seriously? Let us know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and to get a discussion going. Also, of course, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to that subscribe button, and share this video with a friend or two. With that being said, I'm gonna get the hashtag out of here. Thank you guys for checking out the video. Before, until, and after I see you next time though, stay awesome.